So I'd like to call the regular meeting to order. First thing is approval of the minutes, September 5.
Move we approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Additions to the agenda. I had two. One was the state budget in small towns. Second was Park and Rec alternate appointments. Are there any other additions?
No.
Is there a second to add those two things?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, communications. Any communications? Any public comments? Yes?
Gordon, under 2C, the change from electing to appointment of Park and Rec people, I know I missed one meeting and maybe that's when you discussed it, but I didn't recall any Board of Selectmen discussion of that topic. So when we get to it, I hope you'll address why it's appearing on the town meeting agenda. And I would also say that not knowing why you're doing this, I would tend to be opposed to it because I think the more things we remove from public participation, the less participation we get. And I would encourage the board not to do that since you have the ultimate right to appoint when there are vacancies, which clearly you're going to do at the end of this meeting. So I would hope you don't do that. In fact, I would hope you'd reconsider the decision and have inland wetlands be elected rather than appointed so that the board doesn't face the kind of letter you got from last year where they said you either reappoint all of us or we all resign. I don't think that's good for any town, and certainly not good for democracy. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comments? So first on our agenda is we welcome Betsy Morrow, Director of Women's Support Services, to our meeting.
Thank you.
Cornwall resident.
Cornwall resident, that's right. We'll leave those with you.
Great.
Thank you very much for making time on your busy agenda for just a few comments. Most important was I want to thank you. I want to thank you for supporting Women's Support Services. We are a domestic violence agency seeking to respond to domestic violence so that people who are victims of that can find safety and healing. And the town has been a very faithful supporter of our work. Many town residents are faithful supporters of our work, and we could not do it without you. Women's Support Services truly believes that when we transform one life for the better, we transform our communities for the better. And so we really appreciate the community partnership, and Cornwall's in particular. Gordon's right, I am a Cornwall resident. I was around in these hills from the time I was born. My mother's Priscilla Morrow, my uncle is Phil Hart, Joyce's husband.
Full disclosure. Full disclosure.
And in full disclosure, Richard's wife, Pat Bramley, is also the West bookkeeper. So the community connections are really important. We help each other, and that's really important for our work. Women's Support Services last year served 517 new victims of domestic violence and abuse. And of those 517, 17 came from Cornwall. And that's up. Last year, 11. We served 11 from Cornwall. The breakdown of the Cornwall residents, 15 were female, 2 were male, and 14 were adults and 3 were children. So our services span the ages, they span the genders. Domestic violence knows no boundaries. It can occur in people who are economically impoverished or people who are economically wealthy. It occurs across educational lines, gender lines. And so we are here to respond with help and safety. But we know that responding in the moment in the crisis isn't enough. So Women's Support Services also offers primary intervention. So we're in a lot of daycares around the area, including the Cornwall Daycare Center here. and also schools as well. And we just had a wonderful meeting with the principal over at the Cornwall Consolidated School yesterday. But we are in Kent schools, we're in Salisbury, we're in North Canaan, and we run the span from kindergarten through high school. So we're also up at Housatonic Valley Regional High School as well with our programs.
So you're in the school in what way?
We bring programming in at the request of the school. You know, we go to the schools and we say we can help you with things like cyberbullying. So we have programs about cyberbullying. We have an evidence-based program called Safe Dates for high school. So it helps high school students begin to gain skills around what it really means to date well and safely, and to look out for themselves as they explore these relationships, which we know can be really complicated. We begin that program actually in the junior high with a program called Shifting Boundaries, as children in that age group, youth in that age group, are beginning to explore what it means to be attracted to somebody else. So when I say we're in the schools, we're there with programming to help students develop skills or self-esteem, react to bullying, things like that. This year we served a clientele of 877, so I said we had 517 new clients, but that's not our total client load. We also have ongoing support groups. So totally in this area, which is Region 1, and we serve some of the towns over the boundaries, like in Armenia and Millerton and Sheffield, we served about 877 people. That's what we served last year. And we had 450 hotline crisis calls. We're busy, I'm sorry to say. I would like nothing more than to work myself out of the job. So as we go forward, we're also looking for ways that we can be better partners with other providers. So this year we were fortunate to receive a grant from the Foundation for Community Health to strengthen our partnerships with the hospital, with Troop B in Canaan, and also we made contact with every town social worker this year as well. And so we look for a coordinated community response. We know that when people find themselves in the crisis of domestic violence, there may be other things happening in their lives that we're not equipped to address. In some cases, it might be drug abuse. We've seen that in towns. It might be that they have some other kind of mental health issue that we're not equipped to address, but has to be addressed in order to also help with the domestic violence piece. So we try and coordinate that. We know that domestic violence causes homelessness, or can cause homelessness. And we have had people living in their cars who have come to us for help. Not something that a lot of people see in this beautiful area of the state, but it happens, and we're there to try to respond the best we can and to help coordinate other services as well. So that's sort of the snapshot of what we do and sort of what's going on in the towns. But I'm really sort of interested in answering any questions you might have for us or any feedback, because we want to be really good neighbors and really good community supporters and collaborators.
What is your catchment area? What towns do you serve, Betsy?
We serve the towns of Region 1 and some of the border towns, Armenia and Millerton and Sheffield.
Okay, so you don't go any farther south like into New Milford?
We go into New Milford only in the court system. So we have one advocate who is stationed not in our office in Sharon, but actually in the court. And so the judicial area that we serve also captures New Milford through the court system. And in the court system, we advocate for a victim's wishes as that person goes through the court process of trying to seek safety from their abuser.
And what percentage of your budget comes from donations?
Very good question. We have a number of funding sources. So our major funding source is our fundraiser Trade Secrets, which accounts for about 30% of our operating budget. We get about 25% of our operating budget through state and federal grants, which, as the town is struggling because the state of Connecticut doesn't have a budget, so are nonprofit agencies as well. And then the rest of it comes through some miscellaneous grants and donations from individuals and from foundations.
So you could always use more donations.
Always. Can always use more donations.
Is the percentage, I don't know if that's the right method to measure the volume that you see, is that, I guess it's a multiple question.
Okay.
Is the volume increasing, decreasing, more or less steady?
It's more or less steady.
Um,
So we do have 517 this year. Last year it was 522.
That's pretty close.
Mm.
And as a population of the towns that you serve, would that, on some kind of regional, state, national level, is that approximately what would be expected, or on par, high, low? Are you possibly serving more because you do a good job or promote the fact that you're here? Maybe this doesn't exist in other places.
Well, it certainly exists in other places.
Not
But
only the violence, I mean the support services.
there are 17 agencies across the state, so that regionally every part of the state is covered. But every domestic violence agency has its own unique context. And so our context is quite rural compared to something like Bridgeport or Waterbury. But we also coordinate and collaborate across the state. So if there's someone who is in need of safety because they have to get away from the location they're in. So for instance, someone who has been in a relationship with someone who's in a gang, and if that person stays in that geographic area because of the networks that happen, the person could be at high risk. We often get phone calls asking if we can find a safe place for them as a temporary safety measure to get them to a safer place. So each domestic violence agency has its own unique characteristics for the context it serves, but we also collaborate closely with each other.
I guess the question I'm asking is the volume that you have at the agency, at the Women's Support Services, is that more or less the average you would see in other locations based on their population?
As a percentage of population?
Yeah, I guess. I'm not sure that's a good measurement or not.
Right. I've never run those statistics, so I don't know.
I mean, I'm not sure how you measure, is this a violent area or is this not that violent an area? I'm not sure how you measure that, or what you measure it against.
Yeah, and that hasn't been my exploration. But we do know that domestic violence just cuts across all lines.
Right,
So, you know, as a percentage of population, are we seeing more as a percentage? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I see you have a lot of volunteers,
We have a lot of
which is
volunteers.
great. And quite a few of them come from Cornwall, among other places. What do you have people do if someone is interested? Thanks to Richard, we're recording this so it'll be broadcast in the wide audience.
Yes.
So what would volunteers do?
Many of our volunteers are involved with Trade Secrets, as you can imagine. Trade Secrets is a very large fundraiser dependent on a lot of people bringing their skills and talents to that particular event. But we also have people who volunteer in the court system to help advocate for victims. We have people who come in and help us with office work, for instance. We have a renewed volunteer certification program that's happening this fall, so you'll be seeing more information about that. And through that process, we hope to get people who can help when one of our counselors facilitates a support group, for instance. But no one can be involved in something where they're in contact with a client unless they are certified as a domestic violence volunteer. And so training is necessary for volunteering in any capacity where you'd have contact with a potential victim.
Paul's ready for more volunteers.
Always ready for more volunteers.
So are there any other questions, comments? Just thank you for all you do, and whatever we can do to help you guys keep going in
Thank you.
these challenging times, we'll be glad to hear.
And you may or may not know that Virginia Gold is on our staff.
Oh, really?
She is.
Okay.
She is our program manager, and
Oh,
she
great.
brings her considerable skills and energy to helping us make sure that our programs meet all of the standards of best practice that are set for us.
Right.
So, thank you. Thank you for your questions. I wish I could have been more clear answering you, Richard. But the other thing I want to say is my door is always open. My email works, my phone works. I can be at the farmer's market some days. Stop me on the street. Any questions you have, any concerns you have, please don't hesitate to contact me. My door is always open.
Great. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Have a good evening,
You too
everyone.
now.
Take care.
All right. So next is our town meeting of October 27th. This is the annual town meeting where the town report will be reviewed. Do we have a copy of our section of that, Joyce? Should we be signing that?
Sure, I think so one to the other.
Okay, so that's one item that's on the agenda. The second one would be the 5-year plan. So my thought is to have Fred Scoville and Jim Vaneke come next meeting and go over our 5-year plans for capital spending with them if you wish. Might not be bad just to check in.
And Fred for fire department.
Yeah, as those are two of our major departments to get a half-year report on how things are going, and we've wrapped up some things this summer and more things ahead for the fall and winter. So with your permission, we'll sort of dedicate most of next meeting to hammering that out, making some progress. I'll get you a draft of that between now and then. At least what we did last year, what we anticipate doing
What
this
we've done
year.
the last couple of years
Yeah.
too, or sort of what it is, the 5-year
Yeah.
plan has what we are projecting to do
Right.
as it is.
Okay, so those are two things. On the Park and Recreation Commission, we notice is probably as big a turnover of Park and Rec as there is in any organization, and the town clerk did some research, and most area towns do appoint their Park and Rec people. They don't elect them. I don't think actually there's any contest for this time, so we'll be appointing more after this election. We do have,
Virtually anybody that's running is elected, aren't they? There's always not enough people.
there hasn't been a contest in a while that I know of, and now it's not even full. We don't even have enough people there. We do have some reports. We got a couple of vacancies and a couple of people willing to step up. So, Kara Collins, who we appointed recently, decided she did not want to continue. Tricia Collins, no relation, has requested to be on the committee. And Erica Jonick, who wrote us and expressed interest in being on the committee. Also, both people bring good skill sets to the board. Tricia, having been a long-time town resident, and works at the school and coached softball there. And Erica has done a lot of work in her previous town of Falls Village. library director up there, children's librarian, daycare member board, board of finance member. So I think we'll deal with those openings, appointments, and both of those. We got an email today from John Sanders. Chair of the Park and Rec, saying they would like to have those two people appointed, so that's later in the agenda. So it doesn't really matter. It might make it easier in some ways, as we do tend to be appointing these members quite a bit to make it appointed. Just that it's an interesting thing that it is one board that has been that's normal procedure in other towns. It's not necessarily a controversial board or
No, but
whatever.
if they're elected anyway, and if someone were to need to get off before their term is up, then they get appointed anyway, so why change it up? I mean, if it gets to the point where there are several people vying against each other, it's better for the town, people to be able to pick who that person should be or people should be than 3 people sitting at this table.
Yeah, I agree with you philosophically, but practically it hasn't been the case recently that we've had.
But either way, it doesn't
Contest.
matter, we appoint them anyway, if it comes to that. You wouldn't be losing or gaining anything. You wouldn't be losing anything by changing it. You'd still have, if there's a vacancy, you can still appoint someone that's interested.
You can. Said this suggestion came up that we appoint it because it does seem to be not an issue,
Right. But I wouldn't want it to get to be, I mean, as Joanne mentioned, that the same way the wetlands is we're all in or we're all out. 'Cause
well, I
that's
didn't.
just-
I didn't even hear that. I'm not sure that was an accurate
It was
characterization of.
sort of implied in their last letter.
Well, I'm
We'll
not sure.
probably
That,
stagger your appointments, but they're not all the same year.
there's plenty of ways to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's not working right now the way it is on Park and Rec. So.
When was the last time during a municipal election that there actually was a contest on Park and Rec? I mean, I have no
I mean,
idea.
it doesn't matter for anything. When was there the last time there was a contest on the Board of Selectmen? You know what I mean?
Oh,
The
last
last
time.
2 times.
I mean,
Last 2
it's
times.
pretty-
But right
it's pretty-
before that, right,
it-
25 years, you
No,
know, like, you could just
no,
say,
that's
well, let's
not
just
true.
appoint them, you know, I mean, it's
Well, that's not true, though. I mean, there has been,
a couple.
I think in the 6 terms I've served, I've been in a contest 4 of the times. Maybe 5.
More often than not.
More often than not, or at least even. Absolutely. I've been in a contest 4 times. I can't remember how many I've served.
Right, but I think this is a little bit more.
Well, it's a different board. It's a
Right,
different
yeah.
board, and you're right.
And I wouldn't suggest this for a.
Right, but the less power you give to the community, the less productive it is. I mean, it's a town board or a town committee that the town should have the power to elect.
They could. I mean,
Be in lowly Park and Rec or Board of Finance.
yeah, but I think as a practical matter, it's not really happening lately. But as I said, it was suggested to the board that we consider this. Other towns do it.
Who suggested it?
I believe the town clerk noticed that we were doing a bunch of appointments anyway, so why not make an appointment? For our suggestion, I don't really care. It's not my signature issue. It just does seem something that's a chronic thing, and it might make it more organized if we did it the other way. So it's something to think about.
It doesn't have to
So,
be decided.
it's not, it's not gonna affect this coming election anyway. But if we got inspired, we can do it, if people felt need for it. But I thought I'd bring it to the board for their consideration before we write up the call
When do we have to have the call for the meeting?
next meeting, first meeting in October,
Have enough lead time?
right?
Yeah, that'll be the latest. Gotta have a week. Well, 5 days, not
Like 7 to 10 days or
whatever
whatever.
it is. So it'd be best to do it first October meeting at the latest.
So we have to finalize our 5-year plan.
Right,
Then. Okay. Is the 5-year plan also has to be finalized by the Board of Finance?
yes, before the town meeting.
Okay.
Right,
Enough time. Just enough time.
yeah. Okay, so those are the items on the, do you want me to spend time to work up change the ordinance of Park and Rec, or do you care?
I would rather not.
I mean, I don't think it really matters one way or the other. We're always making appointments to it, but I don't think it's worth expending a lot of energy on if it's, I mean, I don't
If
really
it
care.
becomes more of a problem,
Yeah, I mean,
the board can revisit the issue, but said it was suggested something we consider, and we've done that. I said, I don't really care one way or the other, but it is something that's out there. Okay, so I will develop number A and B for the town meeting.
Should we sign this now, though?
Yes, so we can get
The body
things to
can do
print.
it.
Next on our agenda is report of the West Cornwall's water and septic study group meeting. I gave you a draft of the report from WMC. The committee met with the engineers for 2 hours, went over the report in some detail. Sort of changed the focus somewhat of the report to initially it was looking at the whole village and a bunch of a core area going Railroad Street down the main street and then the railroad or the river roads could be added to it incrementally. The new version will reflect the main thrust being the central core, which will maybe take away some of the sticker shock of initially it was over $6 million project. The just doing the core to start with anyway would be reduce the estimated cost to about a $2 million project. Still a lot of money, but the group felt that would probably carry most of the primary objective of the study. The group had a more realistic budget at this point. As you've seen in the plan, the money would be, I assume, funded by the town at some point, and then user fees would reimburse or whatever, pay for the carrying cost of the loan. So there's a bunch of work that needs to be done to make it the financial end and the implication and what the actual fees are. But that's sort of where things are at. The meeting again on the 10th of October with a town meeting, not a town meeting, but a town hearing, open session, well publicized by in November. They're doing more testing, water testing next week, or first week in October. see what some of the current conditions are more. But certainly I think the report was pretty thorough, interesting, something for the town to think about.
So if the
forward.
town's gonna front the 2 million, where does that come from?
We would have to think about that. I assume the town has to borrow the money, and there are some grants from USDA and loan programs, things like that. But at some point, as we heard when we did our bridge projects, whether we get a loan or a grant or we bond for it, we would have to probably call it a bond issue of some type. Because I think, overall the town would be responsible for the project.
So it comes from taxpayers, essentially,
Yeah,
paid back by the users.
yeah, and apparently there's some 25% grants out there from USDA.
I think where the money comes from is a big chunk of the matter.
Right.
Payment.
Yeah, I think that's it, and I think also, from the town standpoint, this would do a lot of good for the people and businesses in West Cornwall, but it would be a significant responsibility for the town to take on, because once we finance it, even if it's paid for by user fees, it would be a town responsibility to make sure it works. There would probably have to be some governing board or something else that would do it, and it would generate fees, unlike, bridges don't pay themselves back. But this, to be fair, this would have some money coming back in to offset it. It would probably increase the value of some properties down there. The town would get some increased tax dollars, maybe, because the properties are worth more with this. But I think, there's a responsibility that comes along with these projects, and I think at this point, the biggest thing is to try to get the numbers and the responsibilities as clear as possible, so the town, eventually, and the people there can make a real decision on what it will cost and how a system like this would work. A complicated business, as you can read in the paper in other towns. It's a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's gonna need to be very clear. Who's responsible for what, and where the money's coming from, and how it's gonna get paid back.
Mm-hmm. But I think this is, it's been a long-term issue for that part of town, and I think this has taken it farther than it's been researched before, and they're
For
really
sure.
intelligent, thorough way at the present time. So
Mhm.
anyway, I just thought I'd bring up to date with that, put it on our radar. Any other questions about that? So a couple more meetings.
Next
I mean,
meeting,
they're meeting to try to finalize things as far as the report. The grant also has a life, expiration time, probably, a month or two. And then the engineer will make some public presentation of the findings and implications and data and why he decided to go with this type of system he did.
and so the next meeting is in October next
Yeah,
month.
the committee meeting, which again are of course open meetings.
Right.
And then, a well-publicized town-wide meeting in November to go over that and get some public feedback.
Right, and there'll probably be some more informational meetings along, getting feedback and going back and forth. So,
Right.
But the grant for the study ends at the end of
Yeah,
this year?
well, yeah,
Or
I mean,
November?
it ends in August. I mean, most of the work had to be done in the summer, so the state wants us to wrap it up. So that is that. Other water issue, fire hydrants. I talked to Josh today, and I think the fire hydrant underneath the bridge should start next week. So that's one hydrant. In the big water report, there was another hydrant that was proposed which was by the brook going over Furnace Brook. And the advantage of that would be, problem with the one underneath the bridge is you cross railroad tracks. So the thought was we might put a second hydrant in down there off the bridge. There's this thing called a swing hydrant, which they use in other places. It's basically a pipe that swings down into the brook. And that seems to be pretty good access. Might not have the year-round water flow of the other one, but it's easier access because you don't have to go across the tracks to get at it.
This is on the Popple Swamp.
Swamp Bridge, Popple Swamp Road, and those are relatively inexpensive, I think a couple $1,000s. So I'd like to follow up and get a quote on putting that in. If we can get that done, that would really set up that area for good improvement.
So in essence, that's a 6-inch pipe or a 5-inch
Yep.
pipe, whatever it is, that's against steel
It's
pipe?
horizontal. I'm not sure it's steel or plastic, but it's horizontal. And you just drop it down vertically into the water when you need it.
And what holds it up?
There's a little pivot,
Chain?
steel.
Lock and chain
Yeah.
or something?
Yeah. So that's one place, and then there's another area we have a defective hydrant by the Four Corners up by the old Berkshire store, State Garage. It's plastic pipe, it's broke, so I'm gonna try to get some quotes on repairing that.
It's not defective, the state broke it. They hit it with their backhoe or something last year.
That's, they deny any,
Of course they do, but that's what happens.
well, anyway,
So can we go back to the swing one? It's gonna,
Yeah.
does it drop into the Hoosey or it drops into Furnace Brook?
in the Furnace Brook off the bridge. Okay, so I can get some, a quote on how much it would cost to fix the hydrant with a steel pipe on Route 4, on the Four Corners. So, and hopefully that will help in 2 other locations. Anything else on fire hydrants? Highway projects,
Oh wait, the fire hydrants, we're done with putting something in the green, right? At some point in time,
The
we were
green.
talking about putting a big tank in the triangle.
right, yeah.
That's how it all started.
Yeah, that was the
That's
first
off the
idea.
table.
Well, it
Yeah.
started by putting a tank behind the firehouse.
Right,
That was
Right.
sort of the
right, and
initial
then it
thing.
went to the green, and now we're just gonna take it from the river, so.
Right, take it from the
those are
river
all
and
done.
Furnace
Okay.
Brook. Right. Anything else on fire hydrants? We got our paving done last week. Looks good. Valley Road, Clark Road, Great Hollow Road.
Who did Great Hollow? Who did that skim coat?
The paving contractor.
Wasn't very impressive.
The final or the?
Whatever that skim coat was. Did they do something, they did like a skim coat, did they do
Yeah.
something else after that?
They may have put a second coat on
I'll
top.
have to go back again. Last week
Yeah.
it was embarrassing.
Hmm.
So, I thought maybe it was just a patch job that we did, but I'll have to go back over it and see if it got fixed.
Okay.
So they did Great Hollow
Yeah.
from Great Hill quite
Right,
a
where
ways
the
down.
stop sign
Right.
is down.
Yeah.
From Great Hill down to the end, the parts of
They
it.
did parts of it.
Yeah. And what were the roads that they did?
They did Valley Road by where the bridge was. And they redid part of Clark Hill Road. And they did part of Great Hill Road. By the Great Hill by the Beaver Dam.
So it must have been up top.
There was towards Eli Bunker Road, towards the Goshen line. There was
At the
this
end
area that had gotten wet. So I think we put some drainage in there and repaved it.
I get Clark Hill and Clark Road mixed up.
Right.
Clark Hill is off of Route 4.
Right.
That's the road they did.
No. They did the one off Great Hill
Okay,
by the horse farm.
thank you.
So those got done. Jim's pleased with the results. And the bridge, Flat Rock Bridge, is underway.
Anyway, quite impressive.
Big hole in the ground.
Did the footings get set today?
The footings are supposed to be done today. I was up there yesterday. I haven't been up there today. So footings today and pieces come tomorrow depending on the weather forecast. So they move right along. So that looks good. Okay, next is town demographics, town plan. The town plan is set to kick off their planning session on October 20th at 7:30. It's Friday nights, I believe 7 o'clock at the school. Child care available. Interesting map came in last week, which I sent you, I think, from University of Connecticut, based on the U.S. Census. They're projecting town of Cornwall will drop from current population around to about 1,400 people down to 900
Look where it
people.
started, and it's no surprise.
Look at the orange and red here, though. The orange and red are the numbers that are really impressive.
Right.
The age group, oh, because it's age group,
Age groups.
20 to 30.
And there actually is
Virtually zero.
there's a age group that didn't show up on here, the bottom age group, which is under 5, disappears. So here's a copy of this if you want to see it. I think it says
What's the time frame board?
this is by 2040.
It's 1970 to 2040.
Right. So in the next, basically 20 years, they're looking at a reduction of almost.
You had your peak in 95.
It was pretty steady around 1,400. It was actually over 1,400, 2,000, and now it's dropped down to about 1,360. So I think it's the top priority of the town to make sure that do what it can in the next while to try to bend this curve back up. For the implications of going down to a town of 900 permanent residents is not a good one. Other places have looked at Litchfield County losing population of about a third in the same time frame. So this is not just a Cornwall problem, it's countywide.
It was a whole, yeah. I
There was
looked at-
only one that went up. Who was it? Sharon?
They're predicting actually Falls Village going up. But it's a projection. Hard to tell, but I mean, whatever it is, whether it's 900 to 1,000, clearly it gets into the question of the school population, increasingly elderly population, and what can the town do as we're launching into the town plan to create more jobs, allow more jobs, more businesses, more building, and encouraging young families in town.
What did the other areas of the state, I didn't dive down to the whole thing, I just looked mostly in the towns around us in
Right.
Litchfield County.
I haven't seen it for the other parts of the state.
I'm just curious to know what, southeastern Connecticut or northeastern Connecticut or,
Goshen actually was the town that was going to increase in the next, whatever it was, 23 years.
Okay?
I wasn't sure why.
Goshen.
Yeah, just
It's
they're
Republican down.
climbing up. Yeah, well, can I say that on camera? I didn't know if it was their proximity to Torrington and to Hartford, just because they don't have to go down the mountain and up the mountain for Region 1 folks have that extra 20-minute drive. And they're that much closer to Route 8 and 84.
I think they're just doing on what the census is doing now, but I believe Goshen's losing school population like other places too, so.
I thought they were too. That's why I was surprised on the, when I picked Region 1 towns, then I picked Goshen, Litchfield, and I don't know, some Warren or something, just some out of Region 1 towns just to see what their population was. And it didn't, I mean, it wasn't like a big spike or anything, but it was at least on an uphill climb, not down. Even Litchfield was on a downhill slide. So I didn't know what made them project that town, which is, it's like 5 miles away. What
Right.
would make that town climb and ours decline?
I don't know.
Because they didn't really have that kind of information, it was just projections.
I think just-
Yeah.
Projections on, I think they were looking at birth rates and death rates a lot.
And just going on that.
Yeah. And again, it's a year-round population too. Whether they're seeing some conversion of partial partial residences into year-round residents. Tyler Lake people living there full-time instead of part-time. But I think it's, like a lot of projections, it is, see what actually does happen, but I think should be a wake-up call to the town that we need what we're doing now, we need to do things somewhat differently and
Yeah,
take concrete
this
action.
is
We don't want this to
a
happen.
pretty serious projection.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and so I think there will be there's a lot of meetings coming up next month to talk about these issues. So I think it will get people's attention and, sort of see what type of town they want to have.
I mean,
So-
certainly part of this is a bubble of baby boomers moving through the population. I mean, that's part of what the movement is. I think the difference here in Connecticut or maybe in the Northwest, as opposed to other parts of the country, is there's no influence or influx of vast amounts of young people and young families, which is happening in Texas.
Right. All the weddings are in Texas.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Not that that's necessarily the place to go to, but that's where they're going,
Right.
Florida.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
cost of living and taxes, right? Jobs?
Yeah. Did talk to people though that said they moved to Cornwall because the taxes were so low compared to New York State. So there are
Of course,
advantages.
yes.
So there are great advantages to living here.
That's right.
So next we have tax refund. Got that, Joyce? Okay, so we have two tax refunds. Overpayment of $8.06 in 2904, 2131. So we have three. I'll make a motion, we grant all three.
Second.
Any discussion
On the
Oh.
recommendation of the tax collector, like you.
on the recommendation of the tax collector? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let's see, addition to the agenda, state budget, you've probably been following. And I've sent you copies of the budget that was passed by the legislature, its impact on the town. I'm going tomorrow to a meeting in Waterbury where we'll in theory hear updates on what's happening and what the implications are for the towns. Governor is on record saying he's not going to sign the passed budget, and they're supposed to sit down and negotiate something that will work, but it's in play. This afternoon, the Council of Governments circulated a petition to the governor asking him to sign the budget as drafted, and I agreed to sign it, figuring that the budget that was passed by the legislature does not have the teacher pension tag that the previous budget proposals had in it, and it had several items of mandate relief that we've been talking about for over 20 years. And I think clearly the state has to do some things differently, and the towns are probably going to get some reduced funding one way or the other, but at the same time, I think all of us felt the town should get mandate relief if they're losing state aid. So we signed on.
Where did where is the revenue and or expense, where's the additional revenue coming from, or the expense reduction in the budget that the legislature passed? Or are they just passing the can,
Kicking the can down
kicking
the
the
road.
can down the road?
Yeah, I'm not convinced that either budget is really balanced. And each budget, I think, had big deficits, if not next year, then 2 years after it. I mean, the state has $70 billion in underfinanced pension and loan obligations, and the current budget is somewhere around $20 billion. So it's not necessarily, a partisan thing. The state has big fixed costs, big obligations out there. So it's very hard to see how the towns are going to keep their education funding, especially the towns out here. But having the towns pay for the teacher pension program, which is way underfunded over a long period of time by the state, I think that's clearly a step in the wrong direction. There's also this thing about a second home tax that came out of the blue, 2.75 mils on second homes.
Yeah, wait, that was an interesting one.
That came out of it, which again, probably would have to be collected by the towns and then turned
Is
out.
that every year or just upon the sale?
I think that's every
I think
year.
it's annual.
I think the state has its eye on
That was like a last minute, like, where did that come from?
where did that
That's,
come from.
that's an interesting idea, though. That's an
There
interesting
are,
idea.
yeah, but I think anytime the state eyes,
Who's gonna
Towns.
collect it and how? And
right, we're gonna collect it and it's
the
all
town's
gonna,
gonna spend the money to collect it and they're gonna give it all back to the state.
right. And
Well, I
anytime
think
that,
that pales in comparison to paying it.
but
Somebody had to
the,
actually pay that
Right.
extra.
and what's 2.75 this year can go up quickly next time, and that, again, anytime the town collects revenue for the state from our tax base is not a good precedent or a good place for us to be in.
Well, the state could always sweeten that by saying we get some small percentage of that
Right.
as a revenue source.
But I don't think we want to collect property taxes from the
Right,
state.
right. I'm not saying we do. I'm just saying that they.
I think there needs to be big reform of the way the state does a lot of things. So to be continued, we'll see what's going on. I think the other concern too was that the state, in theory, if there's no agreement reached by October 1st, then towns that get a lot more state aid than we do will not get that state aid on October 1st, and that's really going to put Torrington's and some of the other places in a big
We talked
Fine.
about pilot also not going out on October 1st, pilot payments,
right, which is going to
which affects, I think that was one of the big things they were talking about, the city of Hartford. The
right,
city of Hartford gets dramatic amounts of
Yeah,
money.
They're gonna file bankruptcy, right?
yeah,
Well, yeah, I think, but part of that was because of the pilot payment that they wouldn't be receiving on October 1st, or the ECS payment that they wouldn't be receiving.
right.
I think that was because if nothing happens on October 1st.
Yeah,
then-
all had to do with state aid, yeah, they still got bills to pay.
Yep,
um,
okay, well,
The state's had a couple years, they haven't solved the problem, and I doubt that the three of us are gonna come up with a solution
I'm not seeing that
in
happening.
our discussion right now. But
Not that anyone's gonna listen to anyway.
it's a problem that you just said, $70 billion in obligations that they're really not talking about.
right. And there's balloon payments out there. I mean, that's the thing about the teacher pension thing. I mean, it's only $98 million this year, but there's big balloon payments out there to be made, so that 98 million can go up to $1 billion pretty quick. So we'll stay tuned. Next edition was Park and Rec. Tricia Collins and Erica Jelic. Do you know, Joyce, did Kara Collins actually, she doesn't want to continue, did she actually resign or she doesn't want to continue?
Kara was out today, so I couldn't find out if she
Right.
actually submitted a letter, but not that I've seen.
Okay, but we know there is a vacancy,
An alternate vacancy.
alternate vacancy. So the thought is that Erica will fill the alternate vacancy. And what we could do is maybe appoint Tricia pending receipt of a resignation from Kara Collins. Make sense? So I'll make a motion to appoint Tricia Collins to replace Kara Collins as a full member upon Kara Collins' resignation, and Erica Jonick to fill the alternate vacancy.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So that's our additions. Any public comments?
Is the October 10th meeting of the West Cornwall Septic Committee?
Yes.
I think we should remind people or tell them that we expect to have the revised draft report up online, available on the website, and so they can look at it, and that everyone is urged to read it, and if they're interested, come to that meeting. As you said, Gordon, it is an open meeting, and the committee is hoping that people will come to that meeting. It's been moved to Town Hall from its normal site in West Cornwall. So if people want to come, it's 5 o'clock on October 10th. And as soon as we receive the revised draft, it's going to go up online. One other point was you had said that Vera had researched and found that most towns appoint their park and rec. If Vera would also research, she would find that more than half the 21 towns elect their Inland Wetlands Committee. So you might consider that as information for future consideration. I wanted to know where the swing hydrant is in Furnace Brook.
It would be hanging off the bridge.
Railroad bridge there.
The little bridge there?
Yeah.
So does that impact the thermal refuge? Because last year, Furnace Brook was the only thermal refuge on the Housatonic that remained, workable. And so I'd be concerned, has DEP been advised with the fly fishing groups? Because how does that impact the thermal refuge as Furnace Brook goes into the Housatonic there?
It probably wouldn't impact it because this would only be usable when it would be full flow of the brook. It wouldn't really be usable. That brook dried up so much you couldn't draft out of it last summer. It's super dry conditions, you can't use it.
Well,
And the thing would be out of the river. You'd only use it when you'd be drafting out of it.
I don't know,
I think it's,
I know it was a dry year last year, but as I said, I read that the DEP said that Furnace Brook was the only viable thermal refuge on the Housatonic in Connecticut all summer. So I think it's doubly important that it be checked out with DEP, that it's not impacting that thermal refuge.
Well, I think as Gordon just said, last year would be a time frame you couldn't use it. It wouldn't be used at that point.
I'm saying it remained viable, DEP
It
said.
remained viable for the fish, but it would not be viable for the fire department. The fire
Well,
department
I'm not
couldn't.
sure, I just think that they should be consulted and it should be checked because it's important. And my other point, I would like the other selectmen to know whether you endorsed Gordon's decision to sign the petition to support the budget that was passed. Did he speak for you?
Well, this was the first time we heard of it, he didn't ask us.
I know he couldn't because he got the petition. I'm just asking you as an elected official and as a citizen, I'm asking you, would you have signed it as a selectman, or would you, if you had had a meeting, would you have supported signing?
I didn't read the whole, how many pages, 1,200 pages that there was, but
I'm sure Gordon didn't either.
I kept up on the highlights of what was going on from the beginning to where we are right now, and at this point, I probably would have endorsed it also.
Mhm.
I would generally agree with what you said. I'm not happy with the budget because I don't think it really goes to the crux of the problem. Everybody wants to maintain their piece of the pie without putting up some skin.
I'm not opposed to it, I just wondered where you stood, that was
Well, I'm
all.
telling you, I'm saying that I would generally agree with his signature on it. I haven't read it all, but I don't think the state legislature is doing their job
Thank you,
because they're not solving the problem.
thank you.
Okay, any other public comments? Going once, going twice, and 3 times. Okay, next thing is bill payment bank reconciliation.
That's it, right?
That's it, except for the pen.